Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to talk about the office of the CFO. Mike, welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. All right. So kind of give us an idea of what is a CFO, and then we'll kind of peel into who you are.
Okay. Well, CFO by definition is the chief financial officer of a company. And I like to expand that definition to encompass what I call the office of the CFO, because that's what they're responsible for. It's not just a technical role that has to be filled. CFOs today have to have a broader scope of understanding of the entire company. They work as a strategist with the CEO and work directly under the direction of not only the CEO, but also integration with the board, and also have usually a pretty strong relationship with investors, key investors. So it's more than just what typically people would think of as a CFO. It's not it's, one of the things that oftentimes gets confused is a controller versus a CFO. Again, you have to look at the type of company and where they are, but the CFO is typically the top financial person. And some companies, frankly, may call it a controller, although it gets lost in the definition when controllers are typically looking backwards at all the historical data and reporting the results so that people can, on the other side, as they produce the results and the reports, they can analyze those and use them looking forward. Well, the CFO is on the forward-looking side. So they will oversee the controllership function, but they actually operate more on a strategic go-forward basis, looking forward.
Got it. So give us an idea of how you got started in this game, and then I've got some cool questions to ask about investors and CEOs, and we'll dive into that in a bit.
Sure, that's fine. Well, I don't want to be too boring with too much history, but I started my career with Ernst & Young, and I was with them for about 20 years. Served in local, regional, national, and international roles. My last role with them was working for the chairman. I headed up one of his 5 global initiatives based in New York at the time. But interesting enough, I started my career in a small office called Orlando, Florida. I was there for about 10 years, and I understand that you're very close to Orlando,
Yes, sir.
and where you're based as well. So certainly familiar with the marketplace, even though it's changed dramatically since I was there. But I ran an emerging business group for Central Florida for Ernst & Young. And so I was dealing with everyone from the folks that were generating revenues and making money and growing and taking to the next level, as well as those guys that would come in with literally a box and pull out a machine and put it on my desk and say, "This is a perpetual motion machine. Let me show you how it works."
Yeah.
So we had it on all sides. So I've worked in the small companies, large companies, et cetera. And then after many years with Ernst & Young and having done enough travel, I had been an administrative partner in the international office for a couple of years and decided I wanted to get more back into client service. And so I ended up leaving the firm and moved back to Atlanta, where I had been the regional director for Ernst & Young for about 6 years. So I had, a network, and that was kind of an old home base for me. And I teamed up with a couple of guys, and we ended up creating the first national professional CFO firm. Ultimately became 37 practice offices around the country. I had the pleasure of opening 30 of those. And we ended up selling it through a step transaction, effectively to Ronstadt. And in 2010, continued in that same space of serving the office of the CFO, except this time with supporting universities with their outreach into the business communities where they were based, and because there's a lot of synergy between the community and academia, if you just can build the bridge. And so we did that with a variety of universities, one of which, by the way, in your backyard was Rollins College. We did a lot of work with Rollins and Florida Atlantic University. Anyway, so it kept me in the mix. And then after non-competes ran out and we had grown the McCracken Institute at the time, we ended up taking that and starting, again, the McCracken Institute for Advanced Learning and Finance in concert with universities to train next generation CFOs. So, and now today we have the same things we did at one time matured a bit from what we did in the Tatum days with professional CFOing, if you will. We actually do that now through McCracken Alliance Partners, as well as on the education side, training next generation CFOs.
Yeah. So I remember, so at Rollins, it's on right off Park Ave in Winter Park, and
It's beautiful.
it's gorgeous, man. And the university there, it's such a beautiful site, and there's water nearby. It's gorgeous for anybody who's looking at colleges. But my daughter, so I had 3 kids. It seems like every time I had a kid, I had a new location. But my youngest daughter was born in Longwood, which is right down the road from Rollins.
Sure.
But they have such a great alumni in the financial world and building businesses. Very smart people have gone through and built Rollins. Yeah, very, very, very smart people. Let me ask you this question. You've, starting with EY, building your own, having some exits along the way. Like, why not just kick back and be on the beach somewhere and, just, take some consulting gigs every once in a while or do some investing? Why build an institute focused on building, future generations of CFOs? Why not just hang out and go skiing all the time or something like that?
Yeah, well, we made those decisions a couple of times along the career path here, I guess. But, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've started a number of companies in addition to the ones that I'm referring to here. I started at ISP just at the time. I think they tease around and say Al Gore invented the internet. Although my ISP, this company called TrustedNet, it wasn't quite as rapidly growing. We sold the assets actually for about $2.5 million. And then started another company recently called Walk Safer. And Walk Safer is an app. And the thing that we discovered in the marketplace is all the apps that are safety apps to protect people, those are happening after you're approached by the criminal.
Hold on, let me hit this button, right?
That's right. Hold on, let me hit the button. Well, what we've done is we've attached an alert system, a feature that lets people know that they are going to be on video streaming if they approach that person. So we're always looking for nuances that will add not only to our core business on the finance side or in the support of management, education, but we're also looking for executing that same entrepreneurial spirit in other areas when it's too compelling. So I just could not go sit on the beach.
Yeah.
Could we do it? Yeah. I mean, economically, we're comfortable with that, but that's not really my goal in life. My goal in life is I've got 7 kids. I think you mentioned you have
Holy moly.
3.
Half of what you have.
Yeah, so we have a lot to do on the family front, but at the same time, we enjoy being in business. In fact, my wife, Julie, is a leadership development specialist. She was a partner with RightPath after 20 years in banking with Wachovia and First Union, et cetera. And so we work together. It's a family business, but at the same time, one of our subsidiaries is owned by CFOs or CFO partners.
Yeah. So your wife of the,
yes.
Is in the business as business partner. Like how's
right.
that working with, if I asked her, what's Mike's superpower, right, in business? And I asked your wife, what's her name, Julie?
Her name's Julie.
Okay. Hey, Julie, what's Mike's superpower in business? What would she say?
Well, one of my sons kind of characterized it, and it's just because of my nature. He said, a lot of people that they collect coins and they collect artwork and they collect that. He says, you collect people. Because I think that's where business stems from. It's relationships. And so that's my cornerstone is relationships with people and taking it from the approach of how do I aid them and value them? If I get something out of it, that's great. And you can't be an entrepreneur and not think there's some value somewhere eventually, but it doesn't have to be established specifically to generate immediate value to me. If I can add value to somebody else, that's a good foundation.
So Now here's a chance to either get brownie points or lose big time here, Mike. What is your wife's superpower in business?
Believe it or not, she's a relationship person too.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's what attracted us to each other is
Yeah.
relationships. She left the banking world candidly because she wanted to help next generation folks. So she went into leadership development, became a partner with Right Path for a number of years. Excuse me. And then, we continued with that after we sold my company Tatum in 2010 to Ronstadt. She and I told you, I retired, yes, after Ronstadt. So I did from the office all the way to my house. And, and as soon as I got home, Julie was there with, now it's time to get ready on the next one. So.
All right. Out of you two, right? You guys are driving in the car. Who comes up with the most ideas, you or Julie?
It's really a tandem. One of our boys played football in college. He had a full ride scholarship at Elon University, and so we had to get on the road to go see him play. And on the route, we would talk, about how we build a business and what we're going to do, what we need to do next, because you got several hours in the car. And we were both very engaged. And I remember one trip, which was similar to other trips. She had a yellow sticky pad, and the whole front of the seat of the car was covered with yellow sticky pads because
Yes.
every idea she was sticking it here. So anyway, that's how we work together and just synergistically. And so it's mutual with the ideas that we come up with.
So here's a personal question. So you built you've been starting at EY for 50 years. You've been in the CFO and accounting and, financial offices, right? Like you've been doing this for a long time.
Not quite that long, but almost.
As you will find out, my math is terrible. For a long time. Okay. So okay, I didn't mean to call you old, but in this, who manages the budget at the house? Who manages the money? You or your wife?
Julie does.
Okay. Got it.
Julie does.
Why is that?
So, it's, on major decisions, it's always a mutual discussion, but the day-to-day and the routines and things of that nature, that's, you have to divide up. It's like a company. You can't do it all yourself. And that happens to be an area that she's got a strength in. And so I focus on other things.
Yeah, I bet your all's finances are like to the 10th of a penny, like because you guys run a CFO company, have, teaching future leaders. Let me ask you this question. All right. Yeah. So you guys are building the future. Like we talked about other companies that does, fractional CFO work. They'll come in and do your books and projecting and modeling and all this stuff. You guys are building the people in the office and the leadership of today's and in the future. Why is that important to you?
Well, it's important because we think that the future of successful business, in fact, I think it's the underlying foundation of a lot of successful businesses now, is you have to have people that work in your company that are business people. What I say, business people first. And that's kind of an eye-opener to people. When we do training in the McCracken Institute, one of the concepts that comes out immediately in the discussions about leading the office of the CFO, I tell people, I say, look, you grew up in finance, or you grew up in accounting, or you may have even grown up in some other aspects of the business, and you've got the CFO hat that's been ordained on you. I said, describe what you are. And they'll come in and the first thing they say, well, I'm a finance major and I did so-and-so, and I'm a controller and I did such and such. And I have a CPA, et cetera. And I said, well, I want to challenge you. I said, next time you introduce yourself, I want you to say, I'm a business person. I understand how businesses work. And my functional expertise contributes to my understanding, but I've got to think through everything from a business perspective in order to be successful and to help guide a company into success. And so that to me is the true foundation of the best leadership, is those that view themselves as business people first, regardless of what functional skill they have that underpins it.
That's pretty interesting. Little side rail question. When you play Monopoly as a family, you, wife, 7 kids sitting around a Monopoly table, a bunch of smart financial people, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah.
does it get kind of bloody, like as you guys are scooping up the land and building empires?
No, I always win.
I
No,
knew it. I
no,
knew it.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. I've got some smart kids. Yeah, we actually, we've played a Monopoly a couple of times, but the other games we play, they like interactive games. They like, the kind where you stand up and you act out something and you get people to guess what you're doing, and or word games. That seems to be very in vogue, as opposed to this ingrained but it's very competitive, I'll assure you. I have one daughter of the 7 children we have, and she's always on the winning team. She's just very, very quick, but she's good at those types of games. And we usually do them in teams, as opposed to the individuals. So that also deflects some of that, everybody against everybody.
So one daughter out of 7.
Out of 7, she's the oldest, fortunately.
And she's
Fortunately for
probably
her.
she's the favorite too, right? Because she's the
Yeah, of everybody. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. All right. Sorry. Back to the CFO. All right. So you're building out future leaders, and you gave this challenge, right? So when as CFOs, CPAs, you guys are coming, the finance majors are coming to companies, and like, what do you do? Well, I count numbers, or I do spreadsheets, I do X. And you said, no, here's the challenge. Say I'm a business person. Like, what?
Right.
Like, why is that a challenge for finance majors, CFOs, MBAs, people coming into this role? Why is that a challenge to them?
Well, I think it's a challenge for everybody who goes through the education system. I mean, the first class you take in college is not business 101. But when you get into the application of all the knowledge you have, eventually somewhere in that process, you're going to start thinking, how am I going to apply this, and where am I going to do it, in what format? Unless you want to be an educator and go on and get your PhD and be a teacher, and then you're predominantly doing research and writing papers, because that's what's measured and requested by universities. They're not asking you to go make sure you work in a company somewhere and create a major success economically, and that will support your prowess as a professor. So it's really from the format of where it comes from. They're starting to put more and more of that type of thinking into education as time goes on, but it's a process. That anchor of understanding business is imperative for everybody if you're going to be in business. Yeah. Now, again, a lot of people also think they don't really think through to the end game. They're thinking along the way that I just want to be a great functional subject matter expert. And so whatever role I take is going to require the skills I learned in college and where my passion really is. And that's what I want to do. But then what happens is somewhere along the way, once you get comfortable outside working, you start thinking, is there a place that I can elevate myself and end up managing that department where I'm working, or managing a segment or a division or an overall organization? And all of a sudden, you get pulled away from that functional specialty, because you're going to have to oversee a lot of functional specialties and a lot of people. So what we do is we try to say, why don't you start out by thinking like a business person? You'll add more value along the way, and you'll be in a much better position to be a leader as time goes on.
Right. Yeah. The CFO's primary role is not to look at a number and just say no all the time, right? What does a good CFO do for specifically? Now, I'll ask this a few different ways.
Yeah. But
specifically to the CEO, what's the CFO's most valuable contribution to the CEO?
In short, well, let me mention one thing, and then I'll mention in short. First of all, you never escape the fiduciary aspect of the requirements of the office of the CFO, because you're chief fiduciary, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have that level of accountability, and you have to be willing to push back when decisions are going to be made that may impact some fiduciary aspect of the operation and the reporting. And you don't record sales that aren't there. Oh, but we're going to close the deal within 2 days after close, can't we just accrue it? Well, no, you have to have a tough skin from that standpoint. But the true question as it relates to the CEO, what CEOs really would like you to do is they would like you to be able to ask the questions that they have not thought of and that they didn't know to ask.
Right.
And that aids them in performing their work. So you have to be a very insightful, strategic-minded person, not willing to, or not unwilling to go to the wall and say, we're just not going to cross this line. And that actually keeps things in check from a fiduciary standpoint. And then from a strategic standpoint, you're one of the key contributors.
Yeah. Because here's the thing is you cross a line based on, well, we will be closing that. And then what happens is people get in trouble, especially if you brought in investors or you're dealing with SEC or you're raising capital, right? You start getting in that, then people start wearing orange jumpsuits, and we don't want that.
Right.
Where for the CFOs and the office of the CFO's role, in terms of compliance, in terms of keeping people on the right track, what advice do you have for emerging CFOs out there for building this level of confidence to guide and coach, and then also staying out of trouble? Like, what advice do you have for emerging CFOs out there?
Right. Yeah, we actually coach CFOs. We have several always in the stable out there that are customers where we're taking them. They've actually gotten the hat. They're the CFO. And we'll have a CEO that will bring us in oftentimes because they want their CFO to be very successful. It's quite an investment to hire a really talented CFO. It's not even the salary and the bonuses and whatever long-term incentives. It's not a cheap ticket. But the advice I would, other than telling them they really ought to go to our Leading the Office of the CFO program in Atlanta. We host 2 times a year there. It's 2 days, very intensive training around the Office of the CFO. But what it does is I tell them you need to understand the broader scope of the Office of the CFO. We've actually defined it in the Institute as 10 pillars of finance. And within those 10 pillars, you at least have a framework around all the attributes and the aspects of the Office of the CFO that you need to be familiar with. And then each of those pillars is broken down to anywhere from 15 to 25 sub-pillars, which will tell you, the broader scope of what is required for you as the CFO. And then in the ultimate game is no matter how much knowledge you have around all that, you really have to execute. And even though, a lot of companies rely on the CFO, oftentimes in small and middle market ones, it's almost like a chief administrative officer in addition to the chief financial officer. But just because they have their hands everywhere, they have the right to have their hands everywhere. Sales would have a hard time going to HR and saying, I really want to know what you do. But I can assure you that a CFO can go to HR and say, I need to understand what you do because it impacts our budgets and it impacts the cash investments that we need to make. So it's an unusual role and it's an exceptionally important role if it's managed properly.
Yeah. So the CFO, taking a look at each department, especially if they go through different, growths from, I'm a startup, right? You don't need a CFO, maybe fractional, right? Until you get to this point where you're like, oh my gosh, we have 100 employees, we have 500 employees. And then you start, expanding the office of CFO. But the CFO with a business person mindset, with an investor mindset saying, if we invest in this HR department, in this group, in this new person, in this new division, right? There could be big impact. So to the CEO, they're offering these great insights and, guide rails and, hey, maybe you should explore here. What value, what responsibilities, what responsibilities does a CFO have to the investors? Like what's their conversations look like?
Right. Well, again, the hierarchy of an organization is the investors are the ultimate, owners, if you will, of the company. And so they hire a management team that reports to them, as an investor, either in, financial statements and also depending on the size of the company, They might even be active investors where they're actually part of the board, but they're usually the board of directors or some advisory board. And so the CEO is the one who has a direct line responsibility to them, but the CFO is a component of that strategic team. And oftentimes the companies recognize that the CFO has, is kind of more of a direct line to certain insights that even the CEO is not going to understand or have as much depth knowledge, and nor do they have time to do that. So they go directly to the CFO oftentimes. And that's how companies develop investor relations roles. In public companies, there's sometimes an investor relations person who's not a CFO or not the CFO, but also in a lot of companies that are small to middle market, the CFO actually wears that hat. And so it's just to garner and to grab the information they need so that they can feel comfortable that their investment is not only being taken care of from a fiduciary standpoint, but that also deals with fiduciary around management, that it's being managed properly. And that the investments are actually going to pay the degree of, well, it's always risk, right? There's no guarantees, but at least you have a better understanding that, yeah, things may work out better if I can see that they're keeping good tabs on keeping a clean house, investing in the right spots. They've got cash flows projected that's not going to require additional investments anytime soon. So I don't have to worry about pulling out my checkbook again. Anyway, so that's where you see CFOs interfacing.
Now I have 3 kids. You've got a whole bunch more. You got 7.
A bunch.
Yeah, a lot. Do you remember all their names, or do you mix them up sometimes?
I have to think. I do. I can just don't ask me to say all their birthdays. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. So 3 kids. Mine are young, 8, 4, 1 at the time of this recording. Right. Yeah. What are some characteristics or some skill sets or something that I maybe I start noticing in my kids, and I'd be like, you might be a future CFO. What are some things that I could look out for? Character traits, characteristics, skill sets.
Well, I'll say this. I just spoke at the National Convention of Actuaries about 2-3 weeks ago out in Scottsdale. And I think that actuaries are different than the accounting and finance types. Yeah. So they get a bad rap sometimes. But I think today there's a difference in today's view of that. How do you know it's a future CFO? Because I think that you're going to find the best CFOs are those that, again, are business people first. So if the child, if you will, at some age or some stage starts reflecting on being a capitalist and actually wanting to create something, be part of something, those are the characteristics I think that will contribute to future CFOing, as opposed to those that really don't care about anything other than just doing the accountability stuff. They're great at putting, block A and block B and just wanting to finish that as fast as they can so they can go play. Yeah. But it depends upon the age too, as to when certain attributes might pop up. But it can come from all sorts of different ways. One of my sons, he works in our business also. He's been with us going on 4 years now. He has his master's in accounting, and he's got some experience with IHG and a number of other companies before he actually came to work with us. But his bent is he found out that accounting and finance, even though he has a good, strong understanding of that, he likes the development side. And so he's more into sales and marketing, and he's brought in a lot of the new use of social media, if you will, LinkedIn and other tools that are available in the marketplace to actually generate opportunities and leads, and he's just excellent at it. It's been a breath of fresh air, and that we're beyond a little bit of the pandemic.
So an accountant who can do sales, he's like a unicorn.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, but see, I think it's an attribute I kind of had too, because I was an auditor. Imagine an auditor, and then all of a sudden an entrepreneur. I mean, is an auditor an entrepreneur? I mean, but again, my bridge to that was wanting to deal with emerging growth businesses. Mm-hmm. Even though my largest client I had was a company called Harris Corporation. Mm-hmm. And I worked on that for about 10 years, in addition to many other things you do, because it's not, none of these assignments are full-time when you're with a CPA firm.
Yeah. So for coaching CFOs now, like, or yeah, so there's a bunch of CEOs listening, a bunch of investors, and when is it a good time to bring on a CFO, right? From doing fractional, external, maybe some interim. When is it a good time to start thinking about bringing on someone full-time for your company?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would encourage companies, CEOs, investors for that matter. If you're going to, let's start at the investor level. If you're going to invest in a company and they don't have a top financial person, I think you ought to challenge it. They ought to have input somehow from somebody. I had a $5 million company, and basically they're in Mississippi. And the owner, this is just within the last 2 or 3 weeks, as we explored with them how we might be able to help them, he said, I need an advisor. I'm too small to hire a full-time CFO. And I don't really need it because I'm not doing a lot. But he says, I've already ended up with one major pitfall because I didn't have a top financial person to advise me. And so, he recognized it after the fact. It cost him a bunch of money. We have another company, it's a $50 million company in Buckhead, Atlanta. And they have discovered, after being in business for 30 years, actually they're doing a handoff to some of the kids to take it over, but they've realized that through their financial structure, if they had just set up a couple of subsidiaries, they'd be saving $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Now, so where do you want to spend the money? Do you want to spend it up front? I mean, you can get a part-time fractional CFO for a couple $1,000s a month. Now, that's cheap compared to realizing one day that I had $1 million a year that I could have been able to retain and reinvest, et cetera, if I had just had the right financial advice. So you just decide. It's like, pay me now or pay me later. Pay me now on a very inexpensive base. Pay me later in a way that really, you're costing that company a lot, or has cost them a lot.
Yeah. So question just popped in my head. The great thing about running a podcast show is you get to ask questions that you're curious about. So for a high-level CFO guy, built companies, sold companies, you've been a part of tons. What does your music playlist look like? If I grabbed your phone and we looked at your playlist, what's like your number one song that you play most often?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bore you with my answer, because that is one attribute that I don't spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Candidly, I love music, but I just have serious.
Yeah.
That's
what kind of music do you like though?
Well, I listen to 70s music because that was part of the era that I had grown up in. I enjoy 80s music because that was part of the era that I had grown up in. And I do listen to country music from time to time. I'm not a classical music type person. That's a little bit too complex.
Yeah. What's like a skill set or a hidden talent or a hobby that you have that many people don't know about? Like, are you like a rock collector or stamp collector? Or do you have like your bungee jumper or bullfighter? Like, what about?
Yeah, no, I'm not the high risk type of a person. I love golf. It's not something that I hide.
Yeah.
So I'm about a mid-80s player. I've been in the 70s a few times, so I know the taste of success
Right.
in golf. But it's fun. And then we do boating. We've got a boat. We live on a lake, one of our places, and so we enjoy that. We enjoy travel. Fortunately, we've done a lot of travel with some of the programs that we've done. I mean, we're in Houston, I mentioned to you. Well, I mentioned Scottsdale, but then last week we were in Houston doing a presentation to a management team that's engaged us to do a leadership development program for the entire team, not just finance. And we stayed and actually ended up going to the Dickens Christmas parade in Galveston.
Yeah.
So any of those are just fun things to do. You tack on to, for years when I was with Ernst & Young, and frankly, when I was growing Tatum, I'd end up flying into a location, and then I'd book another meeting the next day, and then another one the next day, and I might go through different cities. But now I try to arrange travel so that we can actually spend an extra day to really enjoy and learn more about the culture and visit with different groups.
Yeah, that's fun. Where's
Yeah.
your so out of all the places you like to travel, what's the place that you and your wife both enjoy the most to travel to?
Yeah, fortunately, the place we enjoy the most is home. But I think that you ought to start with that as a staple, or continue to modify your your living habits until home is really home. But beyond that, we love the mountains. North Carolina, mountains, North Carolina. We actually we don't have a permanent residence up there, but we've been up there a lot, where it feels permanent during certain seasons.
Yeah.
But it's in the South, predominantly.
Yeah.
We're not cruise people, and we're not island hoppers, but we really enjoy we like warm weather. So the southern states, at least for the predominant share.
Amen to Florida. So as
Amen.
as you guys are building and coaching, CFOs, when should a CFO or a CEO engage with your group for coaching for the office of the office of chief financial?
Yeah, the
that
office of CFO.
Yeah, you got it.
That's all right. Office of the CFO. That's the easy way of doing it. Well, I'm biased. If you've been a CFO for many, many years in a variety of different companies, et cetera, it's sometimes an interesting, continuing professional education segment in your, just in your makeup, to go through a program to see what the latest things are that are being thought of in the office of the CFO. A lot of good CFOs, frankly, are going to be involved with something along the way anyway. They're in networking groups that, talk about current topics. We actually run one of those with Georgia State University and have for 10 years now. So those are valuable things for them to do. But there's really not anything, it depends on the stage of where you are in your life as a CFO. If you're a brand new CFO, definitely ought to be going through leading the office of the CFO. If you're a next generation CFO, or if you're let me cover next generation first. If you're the next generation CFO, you're being positioned for that. You ought to go to leading the office of the CFO. You'll have a much better understanding of the breadth and the scope of what the requirements are, and you'll be learning from people who've been in that business and in that segment of the business for years and years. And then the other thing is if you're the individual who doesn't plan on being a CFO, but just wants to be better in the existing role you have, because you interface with the office of the CFO, like you're a controller, you're going to be a lifetime controller. That's what you want to do. You really don't want to take on that responsibility of the CFO or the breadth, or if you are a treasurer or head of FP&A, financial planning and analysis, you ought to have a broader understanding of the office of the CFO, because you will be better at what you do in your subspecialty if you have that understanding. And it's kind of logic, it just takes some commitment to do it.
Yeah. And it helps from getting this knowledge from people who've been there, done that, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody better to tell you, hey, watch out for this, than someone who's gone through it, or it's cost them a lot of money, right?
Right.
So let's bring, I love the idea of mentorship and bringing people in and coaching and working through this. Now, let
me point out one thing.
Yeah,
coaching and mentorship, just so you know, coaching and because I hear that a lot, which is very common. Okay. The key differentiator between coaching and mentoring is a coach is going to hold you accountable. A mentor is going to share information. They're not necessarily going to be holding you accountable. Coaches are much better, in my view. I mean, everybody has mentors, right? But the problem is it doesn't go that next step to where you've made a commitment to acknowledge that you need to perform and need to hold yourself accountable. And we all have trouble with holding ourselves accountable, just from all the day-to-day things all the way into the business and the things that I really want to do and will do, et cetera. So anyway, just want to point that out.
No, I think that's a great differentiation, because a mentor is there to like encourage you, pat you on the back, maybe every once in a while go, hey man, you shouldn't do that, right? But a coach is someone that you're investing in, paying to give you
Yeah.
advice and hold you accountable to a mission.
They ought to know what you're doing and be close enough to you to know what you're doing. And you ought to honor their input enough to listen to at a minimum, even if they just hold you accountable to the agenda that you set and not even adding a counsel to it other than just holding you accountable anyway. But and that's why we enjoy doing coaching. And we have CFOs that have been trained in coaching techniques that actually do coaching. Not only they have the functional skill, but they also have some of the behaviorals.
So you're in a position now, you're growing this business, you've got, you're teaching universities, you're building emerging, you're coaching, you're having a blast in the world of the CFO. What's your favorite part of the business? What's your favorite thing? Like if you could just do this one thing every day, all day long, what's that one thing for you?
Believe it or not, it's talking to CEOs. That component, when a CEO is, when we're unbundling what's happening in their business and talking about their operation and how they can create a success and what their strategy is and where they're trying to take the business. And then you've got all the nuances of all the barriers that they've engaged in an encounter. Well, I need more capital, or I've got to address my shareholder group, or we're planning a transaction, or I need some additional talent in a certain area. Those types of discussions, I could do those all day long. It's like watching a movie. That's to me the kind of the crescendo highlight.
Yeah. Now they're from startup, small, emerging, mid-market, all the way up to IPO, public, and all that other stuff. Like, what stages of business are you most jazzed about working with?
Well, honestly, all of them, but in different ways. We actually don't have CFO. I have CFOs that are partners of mine who've actually been CFOs of multi-billion-dollar companies. So I know that space. I've worked in that. I've audited those companies. I've been involved. I mean, the last company we sold had sales of about 200 million in sales. So, it's pretty good size. It wasn't a multi-billion-dollar company. But I enjoy working at all of them. It's fun. You get quicker to the point when you're talking with a CEO about all their strategies in small to middle market companies. So again, that's probably what's going to put me in touch with talking more and more with CEOs in depth about what's happening in their overall business, as opposed to a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah. Behind you, now guys and gals are listening in, but behind you, there's a bookshelf. If you were to give me one of those books off the bookshelf and you're like, it could be business, personal, whatever. And you're like, hey, Josh, you should check this book out. What would that book be?
Well, there's a number of them around leadership development, a number of ours, everything from the cute, mundane, Who Moved My Cheese?
Good book, yeah.
Which is kind of a neat little book. But Stephen Covey, some of the things that he's written about, some of those are around leadership development. Those are the ones that really fascinate me the most. The 5 characteristics or the 5 points where CEOs fail most commonly. So I try to understand where CEOs are coming from, having been a CEO for a number of years, at the same time keeping up with some of the more relational things. I don't do a lot of technical reading, and I've been there. I was a CPA for many years, a CMA, which is more on the management side of accounting. So I've been through all that. I was fortunate to make it through a lot of that stuff over the years. So we keep up with what the current trends are, but I don't necessarily keep up with some of the detailed nuances of revenue recognition, and other than just the general nature that is a primary area that needs to be recognized.
Like you don't want
I'm not writing white papers. No more white papers.
No more white papers. You don't want to read an actuarial table on whatever.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, got it. So let me ask you this, Mike. What does the future look like for what you guys are building? Like, how do you know you won in your personal mission to do this?
Well, to be honest with you, even though I'm driven by the passion around taking the business forward, around this office of supporting the office of the CFO predominantly, but also broadening into some of the things we've engaged with in the last 8-10 months is more of a broader management appeal, in addition to the office, because it's so interrelated. We overlap with that. But at the end of the day, it's not like I feel at the outset that if I don't accomplish X or Y, that I failed. And maybe that could, to some people, that would be a failure, because if you don't have such a passionate drive to get over that next hurdle and get to the top of this, then you really aren't passionate about it. And I said, well, to me, having been around and done this for many, many years, it's more just continuing to grow it, take it to the next level, help companies along the way. I get significant value out of their success. And so if they can be successful and we contributed a small part of that success, then I feel like we're a success.
Yeah. For all my CFO buddies out there listening in, and they want to know how could they connect with you and maybe get some guidance from you, some coaching from you, where can people go to connect with you and do a deal with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I guess I come in different aliases there, but it's Mike McCracken, Michael McCracken. But also I'd be glad to share my email address. I'm not sure whether you post this on any part of it, but it's mike.mccracken@McCrackenAlliance.com. They're welcome to email me there. Candidly, that's probably the best way to hook up. And then what we could end up doing is set up a call if they'd like to talk in more detail.
Very cool.
And they can go to our website, by the way, McCrackenAlliance.com. And then there's a McCracken we've got a lot of websites.
Got it.
But the main one, it'll link all of them, is McCrackenAlliance.com.
Very good. What question should I have asked that I completely screwed up and didn't ask you during this interview?
I don't think there's anything specific that I've noticed that was missing, if you will. I mean, we talked a little bit about funding. In some of your audience, they're either seeking deals or they're seeking capital. We serve a lot of companies that actually are looking for investors. And so if that's an advantage to somebody that they're looking to invest in some of these, small to middle market companies that are looking for growth, we don't really deal with, the multi-billion public company investor from that standpoint. We're not investment advisors along those lines. And then those that actually are maybe looking for a transaction. And if you're a small company and you're looking to expand, it could be you need additional capital. We support that process. Again, we're not a fund. We don't invest in companies, but we do invest from the standpoint of adding talent at the right time in the right package, so that it makes it valuable for those companies.
Very cool. Very cool. So what we'll do, Mike, is we'll put all that contact information in the show notes. So our groups listening in, deal makers listening in, CEOs, right? If they're looking to grow and invest in their the office of CFO, they can reach out and connect with you. One final question as we're going through this, right? So we asked you books, I asked you music. What about movies? Right? Is there a movie out there that you've watched and you're like, man, I really enjoyed this? I like thriller movies, but I don't like the ones that are just scary. I like those that have a thrilling experience happening in the movie. It's like the Star Wars. I enjoy the sequence and the follow-ons and knowing that there's another one coming around. So I enjoy things along those lines. So anything that has something that kind of captures it gives you aha moments. I like movies and I also like movies that have a happy ending. They have an ending that's enriching. Hate movies that leave you to the decision point where you decide how the movie ended. Did it go this way? Did it go this way? I mean, that to me is a cop out. There you go.
The writer got tired. They didn't want any accountability.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't want any of the audience saying, "Oh, it should have ended this way or this way." So, but I don't really have a favorite movie.
Yeah.
But just in general, those are the characters.
Yeah, the Star Wars, great series. They did an incredible job putting this all together. But I
Yeah,
like to ask these questions because behind every deal behind every deal, there's a deal maker. And the purpose of this
yeah,
show is to get to know the deal maker, because once you
yeah,
know the deal maker, deals follow. And we appreciate this opportunity to get to know you.
yeah,
And we look
yeah.
forward to working with you and connecting you in with maybe some of the groups that are
Nice, Josh.
raising capital, building businesses, selling businesses. But Mike, thanks for being on the show. Fellow deal makers, as always, reach out to our guests and say, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your story. If what they said is important to you, if you're looking for some coaching as a CFO or the office of CFO, or if you're a CEO looking for some guidance, reach out to Mike and say, hey, I could use some help, and connect and maybe do a deal together. If you're working on a deal or looking for a deal, you could head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and maybe get you on the show next. Till then, we'll talk to you all deal makers on the next episode. See you, everybody.